The film focused on a pastor named Judd Duplessis, a former boxer who was inspired to repent for his mistakes. That day in the church, he had hit another pastor for being annoying, which led to him being tried by church officials and eventually received an assignment from Bishop Langstrom to serve at a church in a small town called Our Lady of Perpetual Fortitude for his mistake. The church was led by Monsignor Jefferson Wicks, an older priest whose church was in serious trouble because the congregation was getting smaller every day, leaving only a few people. Judd was sent by the bishop to be the assistant pastor there, and fortunately, he embraced the assignment willingly. When Judd arrived at the church, he was surprised to see that it did not have a cross. He then met Monsignor Wicks and Martha, a very devout churchwoman. The main thing Wicks told him on their first meeting was his suspicion that Judd was trying to get his church from him. But Judd had no bad intentions, and Judd made sure Wicks knew that, so he was finally accepted. Then, Wicks took Judd outside to talk more. There, he admitted to the sin of envy when he saw the wealth of others and the power his grandfather once had when he led the church. He also confessed his sins to Judd about his personal struggles relating to his lust before welcoming Judd to the church. A few weeks passed, and Judd began to feel at home. On the other hand, there was an employee at the church named Samson who worked as a gardener, and he liked being there not just as an employee, but because Wicks had helped him break his bad habit of drinking alcohol. Wicks understood this struggle because he was also once an alcoholic. Furthermore, Samson did not want to leave the church because he had fallen in love with Martha, and he was willing to do anything for her. Martha, on the other hand, was a versatile person who handled everything for the church and even knew all of its secrets. Near the church, there was a tomb for the founder named Prentice, who was Wicks's grandfather, and someone Martha considered a father figure. It was a square tomb with a door that could only be opened from the outside using heavy tools, but if pushed from the inside, it would open easily. Because the grave was often vandalized by local children, Samson installed a hidden CCTV camera nearby. Then, Judd tried to make a cross for the church, but Wicks forbade it because the mark somehow reminded him of a prostitute. Later, while tidying up the files with Martha, she told Judd about the prostitute Wicks was referring to, who turned out to be Wicks's mother named Grace. In the past, when Prentice was still a pastor and the founder of this church, he was a widower with a child named Grace. However, Grace was not a good daughter, as she preferred revealing clothes and luxury goods. One day, she began selling her body and was impregnated by a homeless man. Long story short, when Wicks was born, Grace brought him to the church for Prentice to care for, but she only stayed there because she knew her father had a lot of money, and she was waiting for him to die to claim all of it. Since then, Prentice bore the burden of protecting Wicks from his mother's bad influence, until Martha eventually witnessed him pass away in front of the holy altar. After the funeral, Grace met with Prentice's lawyer to claim her inheritance, but she discovered that Prentice had spent all the money in his account before it could fall into her hands. No one knew what the wealth was spent on, as the only thing left was a small display that Grace did not expect, which looked like a snow globe. Then, one night, in a fit of rage, she went on a rampage inside the church, even going as far as destroying the cross. Martha saw her actions and whispered a prayer to her that God had forgiven her, but Grace did not accept it and acted as if she were possessed. She then beat Martha until she was finally stopped, and not long after she died in front of her father's grave, where an investigation suspected that she suffered a brain aneurysm. Following this dark story, Judd began to wonder what kept the small congregation coming to this spiritual place. Among the few who remained was Vera, a great lawyer whose father had been Wicks's lawyer and close drinking buddy. She followed in her father's footsteps and lived with her younger brother, Cy. Back then, when Vera was young and had just graduated from law school, her father suddenly brought Cy to her and told her to take care of him without asking any question. She then followed these orders just as Wicks did. On the other hand, Cy was a failed politician who had tried many things to get votes but never succeeded. Another member of the core congregation was Dr. Nat, a local doctor who loved his wife, Darla, very much. She was everything to him, but she eventually left him, causing him to struggle with his mental health, as he felt he was not successful or rich enough for her. Because of this, he was willing to do anything to get his wife to come back to him. Then there was Lee, a science fiction novelist whose career was on the decline. His sales had plummeted, so he decided to change the direction of his work and devoted himself to writing a book about Wicks. The last member of the core congregation was Simone, a world-class cellist who was forced to retire 5 years ago because a rare disease made it difficult for her to walk. She had surrendered to her fate and believed that Wicks could eventually cure her. These people were the core group of church members that Wicks himself had selected, using a strange method. Every week, he preached in a negative tone and attacked new members personally, which made them leave one by one. And this was the reason the church was deserted. From what Judd saw, he felt moved to make a change and started his first prayer group. In the meeting, Judd told the group about his life journey, where he used to live a messy life, even having killed an opponent in the boxing ring once. All of that then changed when Judd found his path in religion. He explained that God's way is not to change who you are, but to make yourself better. This statement completely contradicted the sermons Wicks often delivered, which were always full of hatred and anger. Upon hearing that, Judd made it his main goal to change the church for the better. Martha understood Judd's, but she still wondered why Wicks was not invited to the meeting. Judd replied that Wicks would be notified later, but this answer instead caused a dispute. The congregations felt disappointed and lied to because Judd had other intentions. Cy then documented everything, while Martha sent a message to Wicks to tell him what was happening. In the end, everyone left the room, leaving Judd behind. Before leaving, Martha expressed her disappointment with Judd for trying to overthrow the church leader. However, Judd dismissed her concerns and challenged her to have the courage to confess her sins to Wicks. He wondered if she actually dared to do it because the image Wicks created was so scary. Martha actually confessed her sins to Wicks, and Judd watched as she eventually exited the confession booth. 9 months passed, and in the back of the church where Wicks used to confess his sins to Judd, the roles were now reversed. Judd confessed his sins to Wicks and was honest about the fact that he did not like the problems within the church. He disliked that instead of bringing positive changes to the congregation, Wicks led the church in a way that made everyone more irritable and paranoid. He even exploited Simone to get money, as she had been the one supporting the church by giving $10,000 every month. Meanwhile, Cy used Wicks for political purposes by cutting up the priest's sentences and uploading them to a YouTube channel, which caused people to misunderstand the church. Moreover, Wicks continued to attack new members of the church to make them angry and afraid. Judd began to question if these were the right teachings. The tension boiled over when Wicks kicked Judd several times until Judd was forced to fight back. However, this was exactly the reaction Wicks wanted, as he believed humans must struggle to show their anger to the world. Because of this, Judd declared war to take over the church and promised to throw Wicks out. Unfortunately, without Judd knowing it, Cy had recorded the entire incident, and it was Wicks's plan to make the congregation hate Judd. So, when Judd tried to enter the church the next time, he was immediately kicked out. Later that night, stressed by the situation, Judd went to a bar and drank until he started talking to a lamp and broke it, causing a wolf-shaped ornament to come off. Fortunately, Nikolai, the bar owner, forgave him. Shortly after, when Judd returned to the church, he threw the wolf ornament at the church and broke the glass. Samson saw the action, but luckily, he did not know who had thrown the object. In short, on Good Friday, a service was held at 3 p.m. with only the usual members present. During the service, Wicks delivered another fiery and angry sermon, but Judd refused to pay attention to it. On the other hand, because the sermon was so intense, Wicks became exhausted and went to rest against a secret spot behind the wall right next to the altar. Then, when Judd stepped in to replace him, Wicks suddenly collapsed. Judd was the first to check on him and found blood on the back of Wicks. Nat quickly approached to help, and in checking Wicks's body, Judd discovered a wolf-shaped ornament similar to the one from the bar, except this one was red. When Judd was about to check on the body and take the item he found, Nat stopped him and said he would take care of it himself. At that moment, Martha suddenly screamed hysterically and dropped the cross while shouting out that the devil had killed Wicks. Nat then pulled out a knife that was stuck in the back of Wicks, and Judd noticed the knife had a wolf-shaped handle. Shortly after the incident, Judd was the last to leave the church, and Wicks was officially pronounced dead at the scene. The local police chief, Geraldine, soon arrived to handle this complicated case, and she immediately suspected Judd because of his previous threat to kick Wicks out of the church. This was really bad because Cy had recorded the statement and uploaded it to YouTube. Judd had mixed feelings after this incident because, while he was glad Wicks was gone, this was not the outcome he wanted. He then returned to the church shortly after and knelt down to pray for direction while crying. Just then, an eccentric man appeared and entered the building. The man then introduced himself as Benoit Blanc, and he explained that he did not really believe in God, but rather in his own common sense. He said that he was a private detective who had become interested in the murder of Wicks. As if Judd's prayer had suddenly been answered, while everyone else hated him, only Blanc believed he was innocent. Blanc then invited him to help examine the body, and even though Judd felt weak, he knew he had to assist the detective to clear his name as a suspect. After that, Blanc, Geraldine, and Judd went to the bar and saw a wolf-shaped handle that looked exactly like the ornament from before. They noticed that the object wasn't red, which meant it had been painted. Judd said that he had thrown the ornament earlier, but he was unsure of what happened next. On the other hand, Martha found the broken window at the church and cleaned up the glass. Blanc then looked at a photo that Nikolai had given him, which showed Nikolai and Nat sitting together. Then, from the photo, Judd noticed a small detail. The bag Nat was holding in the picture was now sitting right in front of them in the bar. It turned out that Nat had been there drinking and having lunch, but without saying a word, he quickly left the bar. Shortly after, Judd and Blanc returned to the church and saw Samson making a coffin, but as soon as Samson saw them, he quickly closed the garage. Later, Blanc, Judd, and Geraldine talked about the case, which felt like a mystery from a detective book that was almost impossible to solve. At that moment, Judd suddenly remembered an invitation to a reading of detective fiction that the congregation had attended, which had been organized by Martha. Later, while Blanc and the others were doing some investigation in the church, Martha suspiciously peeked at them. On the other hand, Blanc explained his theory. The first possibility he suggested was that someone might have been hiding and controlling the knife remotely, but Judd told him he didn't see anything suspicious among the members. The second possibility was that Wicks was killed while he was already inside the secret wall, but Judd said that was impossible because the spot was solid and had no gaps. The third possibility was that someone used a remote to kill him while he was inside, and after hearing that, Judd remembered hearing a clinking sound when Wicks fell forward and the knife was stuck in his back. Then, when they checked inside the small room, there was only an electrical control panel and nothing else except for some red thread. Suddenly, Martha was heard crying because she could not accept the police investigating the holy place. Seeing that, Judd escorted her out, but once they were outside, Martha got angry and accused him of being a fake priest. This time, Judd fought back and decided to let the truth come out no matter what. To vent his anger, Judd then went to Samson's place to hit a punching bag, but then, while he was there, he found a clue about the remote. Samson had been recording a baseball game during the Good Friday service because he didn't want to miss it. He realized that the tape could be a clue to the case. Judd noticed that after Wicks died, Nat had called the hospital, and when he compared that time to the baseball footage, a glitch appeared 90 seconds before the call. This glitch was likely caused by a strong radio interference burst from a modified remote control. This seemed to prove Blanc's theory that someone was using a remote control for the murder, but when they compared the recording during Wicks's death to the glitched baseball footage, it showed that the glitch only occurred after Wicks was killed and when Judd approached him. This evidence ended up refuting the remote control theory. Because of these confusing findings, Blanc said it was currently impossible to solve the case, which left Judd feeling very disappointed since he had trusted the detective to help him. That night, Blanc drove Judd back to the church, but before they arrived, the detective said he was sure something was missing from the series of events, so he told Judd to rewrite every single detail that happened, and it took Judd more than an hour to finish the task. After Blanc finished reading the notes, he realized that Judd had been covering something up and was lying to him. If the story was rewound to after Wicks was taken away by the medical staff, everyone else was already outside, while Judd was the last person to leave the church. It turned out that Judd had been hiding a secret about Wicks, which was that the priest still liked to drink alcohol. Every time there was a break in the sermon, Wicks would go to the secret chamber to drink, and Judd had hidden the bottle behind the door. Then, before the police arrived at the scene, he took the bottle because he wanted to maintain the congregation's trust in the church. Blanc was angry about this and asked where the bottle was, but when Judd went to pick it up, he found that it had disappeared. He finally realized that everything had been planned specifically to frame him. The next day, the funeral took place, and the tomb was opened using construction tools before Wicks's body was placed inside. Then, Martha asked the congregation to step outside for a moment, and after that, she seemed to be speaking to Wicks, telling him that he would be reborn. Soon after, Nat came in and closed the coffin before the tomb was sealed again. After the funeral, Blanc and Judd met with the congregation to ask what really happened at their gathering the night before the murder. At first, no one wanted to talk, but then Cy arrived and said he was willing to show all the recordings of what happened. Nat and Martha tried to stop him, but Blanc immediately closed the door. In his story, Cy said that night, Vera wanted to say something to Wicks and the rest of the congregation. She explained that Grace was a poor girl who grew up in the church but was treated badly by her father and her own children. She then revealed a letter which stated that Wicks was actually the father of Cy. This truth disgusted her, but it also made her feel satisfied because she finally knew the facts. For years, she had suffered while raising Cy like her own little brother without knowing the truth. It turned out that Wicks had kept this a secret, and Vera's father knew about it too. However, even though this secret was now out, Lee, Nat, and Simone did not lose their trust in Wicks and continued to support him. Afterward, Wicks said he would give his last service before closing the church, but instead of offering kindness, he exposed all the secrets of his congregation. First, he brought up the drinking habit of Nat and threatened to report him to the medical board. He then turned to Lee and called him a writer who had run out of ideas and was only using the church for his next book. So Wicks promised to tell the publisher not to print Lee's work. He then said that Vera was a nightmare for her father and an unexpected child. Finally, he told Simone that he had never promised her any healing, even though she had given a lot of money to the church. Then, right after that confession, Judd showed up. The morning after that meeting, Cy met Wicks after Vera told him the truth about his father. At that moment, Wicks hugged Cy and admitted that he was tired of the church and the people in it. He also mentioned that he had found the inheritance from Prentice, and he planned to close the church and take the wealth for himself. However, Cy had another plan and wanted Wicks to keep preaching, so they could use his influence to change the town, as he believed that if he had 4 years, he could build an empire with his father. He still had big political ambitions and thought he could succeed by using his father's religious influence in his campaigns. Because of this, Cy began to influence Wicks to kick out the rest of the congregation by calling them leeches. From this situation, a new motive emerged. It seemed that Cy might have wanted to kill Wicks to gain control of the inheritance, since legally it would fall to him. But when he tried to look for the money, he found nothing. He believed that the wealth of Prentice was kept in a secret Swiss bank account, which was why it could never be traced. And after checking the archives, he found a series of numbers that he thought might be the account details. Not only that, but he also found a note regarding the treasure of Prentice. However, Cy could never find a matching account number. He then asked Vera for help, but she didn't know anything either, which made him think that she was hiding the truth out of jealousy. Because of that, he eventually asked Blanc and Judd to help him find clues to this puzzle, promising them rewards if they succeeded. After Cy left, Blanc and Judd took apart the small display that was the only legacy of Prentice, but they found nothing inside. Judd then checked the notes again and began to realize that the clue mentioned was not about an account in a Swiss bank. He looked closer and saw that the numbers were not an account number at all, but rather a misprinted date. According to the paper, it was a burial equipment order that was made the previous Wednesday, revealing that this entire ordeal was planned. The only way to find out who was responsible was to identify the person who ordered the equipment. So Judd immediately called the provider and spoke to a woman named Louise, who said that she did not know about it and would ask her husband James, who was not around at that moment. She suddenly asked Judd for a prayer because her mother was sick. She was worried about her condition and was full of regret because they were not close. Feeling called by his duty as a pastor, Judd asked Blanc for some time to talk to Louise in private and pray for her mother. Blanc waited for a long time until evening, and when he came out of the room, he saw that Judd was still praying. Suddenly, Martha appeared and announced that a storm was coming, so Judd should take care of the church while she looked after other things. Then, when Judd walked away from there, Blanc chased after him, and a heated argument broke out between them. Judd said he no longer wanted to play the game of guessing who the killer was because he felt he needed to focus on being a better pastor. He believed he had been too distracted by other things lately. He then begged Blanc to leave him alone, as he wanted to get back on the path he was supposed to be on. During their debate, someone was seen in the background wearing a robe and carrying a lantern. After taking care of the church, Blanc was met by Geraldine, who eagerly looked for Judd because she believed that she had discovered how he killed Wicks. After rewatching the footage from the video Cy took, she saw that when Wicks first fell, Judd was the first person to reach him and was with him for 9 seconds. She explained that 9 seconds was enough time to kill someone. Blanc was confused and asked for time to prove that Judd wasn't the perpetrator. However, Geraldine had already decided that Judd was the prime suspect. On the other hand, while Judd was heading toward the house of Samson, when he walked in front of the tomb, he saw the person in the robe carrying a lantern again. After that, the tomb's sealed door fell and broke, and Wicks, as if he had been raised from the dead, walked out and approached the person in the robe whom Judd thought was Samson. Judd quickly ran toward them, but he was suddenly punched by someone hiding in the bushes, and he fainted on the spot. Sam! After some time, Judd finally regained his consciousness and saw someone coming, so he immediately left. The person who arrived turned out to be Blanc, who found the body of Samson stabbed with a sickle there. Geraldine arrived shortly after, and she and Blanc immediately checked the tomb, only to find that Wicks's coffin was empty. Upon seeing this, Geraldine was certain about the death because she had seen the last medical report. Blanc, on the other hand, checked the coffin of Prentice and found only bones with the internal organs missing. Just then, Martha appeared, kneeling down and praising God for the miracle that had happened. The police arrived soon after to check the location and found a CCTV camera from the house. At that moment, when Geraldine told the police that another body found, which was Samson, Martha immediately got up and checked the body while crying hysterically. Meanwhile, Judd ran into the middle of the forest and received a call from Louise, who told him that the person who had ordered the construction tools was actually Wicks himself. News of the revival of Wicks spread quickly, and while Lee, Simone, and Cy believed in the miracle, Vera refused it outright. Somewhere else, a phone rang from an unknown caller at Nat's house, who at that time went out to greet a visitor. It turned out that the person on the phone was actually Blanc, who was calling from the police station. The police had obtained the CCTV footage, which showed Wicks walking out of the tomb and approaching Samson. Then, exactly 4 seconds later, Judd was seen coming over to them. It was also revealed that the lab report showed that Judd's fingerprints were found on the sickle, meaning that Judd was the murderer of Samson. After finishing his business at the station, Blanc saw Judd arriving to surrender himself, so he stopped him immediately. He then asked Judd for the location of Nat's house. Meanwhile, at the same time, the congregations were seen coming to the church. In short, when Judd and Blanc arrived at Nat's house, they found the place in a total mess, as if a thief had broken in. When they checked the basement, they found Wicks's body kneeling in front of a tank full of chemical liquid. Blanc then drained the tank and discovered the skull of Nat inside. After checking the area, Blanc found a table with coffee and snacks, along with a bag belonging to Nat that contained the drug pentobarbital, which was often used for sedative or insomnia treatment. Upon finding this, Blanc immediately called Geraldine to report what they had found at the house. On the other hand, Judd was still prepared to surrender himself, feeling that his own will meant nothing if the truth wasn't clear. The rest of the congregation had already gathered at the church with Geraldine, who had officially decided that Judd was the main suspect in the murders. Then, suddenly, Blanc arrived, and the scene became a place for a reconstruction of the events from the day Wicks died on Good Friday. He began to explain how the murder actually happened. First, he pointed out that the bottle of alcohol that Judd hid on the day of the death had been mixed with sedatives, which caused Wicks to pass out immediately. At that moment, Wicks was not yet dead. He further explained that the knife everyone saw was actually just a painted ornament from the bar, and it was not the one Judd had taken earlier, but another ornament that had also disappeared from the bar. He revealed that it had been attached to the robe of Wicks and painted in red to make it blend in with the robe and hard to see, meaning it was there from the very beginning. Meanwhile, the blood everyone saw was actually fake blood that appeared after Nat used a remote control to trigger it while Wicks was lying down. That was why, when Judd tried to pull the ornament out, Nat stopped him immediately so he wouldn't find out that it wasn't actually a knife. Then, while everyone was distracted by Martha's scream, Nat took a real knife with a matching wolf-shaped handle and stabbed Wicks for real. The only evidence that could have incriminated Nat was the whiskey bottle, but he couldn't find it because Judd had hidden it and then removed it when everyone else was outside. However, the part where Wicks seemingly rose from the grave to take revenge on Nat was difficult for Blanc to explain. He admitted that it required a high level of religious understanding that he did not possess. Because of this, Cy concluded that Wicks must have actually risen from the dead, so he stopped the recording and prepared to leave. On the other hand, Simone and the others begged Blanc for the truth, But the detective didn't say much and was silent. When Geraldine then told everyone to leave the church, Lee went outside to call his publisher, asking for more time to finish his book because he now had an amazing story. Meanwhile, Sy made a public statement about the resurrection of his father. However, this was all Blanc's plan. He wanted to make the perpetrator confess their own actions to Judd rather than finishing the explanation himself. He explained that Judd had only covered up the truth to keep the faith of the congregation intact, but the real brain behind everything was Martha. Martha then knelt down to confess her sins before Judd, admitting that she was right in front of Prentice the moment he fell for his demise. She said that, at that time, Prentice showed off an expensive gem that he had spent all his money on. Then, to keep this treasure from falling into the hands of Grace, he swallowed it and died on the spot. He was then taken to the tomb with the jewel inside him, and Martha swore to protect that secret. On the other hand, Grace knew her father had bought the gem because she understood luxury goods. She realized the statue of Jesus that her father gave to her was actually a storage place for a jewel, so her rampage in the church years ago wasn't because she was possessed, but because she was searching for that jewel. For 60 years, Martha kept this secret in her heart until she finally accepted the challenge from Judd to confess her sins to Wicks. During her confession, she told Wicks about the truth behind the jewel, and because of that confession, Wicks claimed he knew the location of the inheritance. Then, the night before his death, Wicks had planned to take the jewel and leave the church, and Martha realized that when she called the heavy equipment service and found out Wicks had ordered tools to open Prentice's tomb. Feeling guilty for confessing to the wrong priest, Martha decided the inheritance must not fall into the wrong hands, so she made a plan to get rid of the jewel. She then planned for Wicks to rise from the dead through a fake miracle that she created herself. To carry out this plan, she asked Nat for help because he had access to the sedative pentobarbital, which she then mixed into Wicks's drink. Everything went smoothly, and Samson, who was also part of the plan, modified a coffin so he could hide inside the tomb and exchange himself for the body of Wicks. He was willing to do all of this because he loved Martha. Then, on the night of the incident, the person in the robe was actually Nat, who gave a signal to Samson from outside the tomb. After the signal, Samson woke up, took the jewel from the remains of Prentice, and pushed the tomb door open from the inside, which was all caught on the camera. Meanwhile, the body of Wicks had been taken by Nat to his house and stored in the basement. This plan should have gone perfectly if Judd had not come to the location. Martha did not expect Samson to be murdered, but she had considered that something might go wrong. So she went to the house of Nat herself to confirm what had happened. In the basement, while they were sipping coffee, Nat finally told the truth about what happened. He explained that after Judd was knocked out by Samson, Nat saw the jewel and decided to take it for himself. He wanted the wealth to win back his wife, Darla, so he killed Samson to take the jewel. Then, since he already had it, he realized Martha was the only one left in his way, so he mixed a high dose of pentobarbital into Martha's coffee. However, what he didn't know was that she had already swapped the cups when he was distracted by the gem. As a result, Nat was the one who drank the poison. He panicked and tried to get it out of his house as he staggered and damaged the decorations before he finally fell to his death. After that, Martha carried his body and put it in the tub to make it look like there had been a fight between Wicks and Nat there. That was the truth behind the lies and the murder plan that Martha had carried out. After telling everything, Martha became weak and fell because it turned out that she had taken pentobarbital herself before confessing all her sins to Judd. In her final moments, Judd prayed for her, forgave her, and guided her to finally forgive Grace. In the end, Martha died in the lap of Judd, and the jewel fell from her hand. Blanc saw what happened, but walked away, pretending he didn't know. 1 year passed, and the church was closed to the public while the old congregation went their separate ways. Lee became a famous author again after his latest book about the resurrection of Wicks became a hit. Vera moved away to enjoy the life she had always wanted. Simone returned to his normal activities, no longer waiting for a miracle to cure her. Meanwhile, Sy remained unchanged and was still searching for Prentice's inheritance. On the other hand, Judd had become the leader of the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Fortitude. He had started to rebuild the dead church, making a cross with his own hands and placing the jewel right on the cross he made.